Cedar gate locked at dawn, metal screeched wood, snapped headlights cut fog, and my private access bent under a white SUV padlock split. Karen Whitlow served a compliance notice, drove through that gate, and claimed community access, saying HOA covenants applied from the road by my porch mailbox with tires grinding gravel fog lingering. On my counter sat time-stamped trail cam footage, an SD card clearly labeled, showing her bumper plate and hinge in 4K. "Show the easement," I said. Finally, someone fought back. The HOA called it shared community access, but the system only recognizes what can be documented and verified. When the process starts, claims without proof don't hold. Fog lay low over the pasture when the trail cam receiver on my counter chirped. Beep. I set my coffee down. No. Not again. The screen showed my cedar gate at the north access, my private access recorded in '78, long before Fourth Creek existed. Headlights cut the gray. A white SUV rolled up, paused, then surged forward. Metal squealed. Wood snapped. I grabbed my jacket and jogged to the porch. Gravel crunched under my boots as the SUV pushed through the busted hinge like it owned the road. The driver's window was down. Karen Whitlow's face flashed in the dawn, lipstick perfect chin high. "Morning, Mark," she called like we were neighbors. "You just broke my gate," I shouted. She lifted a hand, palm up. "It's community access. Don't be difficult. It's not community anything I said. It's my access." Her SUV bounced over the cattle guard and disappeared toward the subdivision taillights swallowed by fog. At the gate, the padlock lay split in the dirt. One half dangled from the latch like a loose tooth. A smear of white paint streaked the cedar. Her paint. I heard my father's voice the way you hear thunder before rain. "Don't let loud people tell you what's theirs, son. Paper decides." My phone was already in my hand. "Burnett County Sheriff's Office, Deputy Heron." A tired voice answered. "This is Mark Rohr," I said. She did it again. A pause. "The HOA lady." "The HOA lady," I said. Third time. And this time I've got it on camera. Heron exhaled. "Mr. Rohr, you know how these things don't these things me," I cut in. "That's criminal trespass." She busted a locked gate. "Any threats?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just entitlement." "All right," he said. "Email me the footage. I'll make a report." "I want a unit out here," I said. "Today." "I'll see what I can do," he replied, which meant maybe. Back inside, I pulled the SD card and opened my laptop with a soft click. I watched the time-stamped files load. Click. There she was in 4K license plate, clear bumper hitting cedar. No doubt. Before I could send it, my email chimed. Beep. Subject line non-compliance notice. Access obstruction. I opened it. The message read like a sermon. "Dear resident, your gate structure has been deemed non-compliant with community standards and is obstructing shared community access. Failure to remove within 5 days may result in fines." I laughed once. "Resident," I said out loud. "I'm not your resident." My phone buzzed, blocked number. I answered. "Yeah." Karen's voice slid through sweet as syrup. "Mark, I'm trying to help you. The board is getting complaints. People feel unsafe with that gate." "Unsafe?" I looked at my torn hinge. "You drove through it. It's a shared access path," she said. "We have authority to maintain it." "Show me the easement," I said. Silence, then a sigh. "It's on our plat." "Reserve A, everybody knows that." "Everybody knows," I repeated. That's not a recorded easement. Her tone tightened. The covenants apply to the community. I'm not in your community, I said. My deed predates your HOA. She made a small offended sound. Don't threaten legal action. We can resolve this like adults. Adults don't break locks, I said. Her voice cooled. If you keep obstructing shared community access, you'll be fined. Daily. On what authority, I asked. You'll hear from compliance, she said, and hung up. The kitchen went quiet. I stared at the notice on my screen, then at the video file, then at the broken gate outside. I forwarded the footage to Deputy Heron. Then I hit reply all on the HOA email and attached 3 frames, her bumper, her plate, her face. In the body, I typed one sentence. You don't get authority by driving through it. Show the recorded easement. I printed the notice, the paper warm as it slid from the tray, and laid it beside my father's deed folder on my workbench. Outside the gate hung Crooked waiting. Somewhere down the road, Karen thought letterhead made her right. I had records, and I was done letting her clipboard pretend otherwise. The notice was taped to my gate like a warning label. Bright white paper laminated zip-tied through the slats I'd repaired the night before. The wind worried the corners, making it flap against the cedar. I read it standing in the cold coffee steaming in my hand. Formal notice of non-compliance. Karen's language. Polite threats dressed up as policy. It said my gate violated community standards and interfered with shared access. It cited sections and subsections. It did not cite ownership. I tore it down and folded it once. Authority needs jurisdiction, I said to the empty road. Back in the kitchen, I laid the notice on the table beside my father's old map tube. The tube smelled like dust and oil. I slid the map out, slow, careful. The paper was thick yellowed, but the ink was sharp. Blue lines traced the northern utility corridor. A red X marked the access. My father's handwriting ran along the margin, steady as a fence post. I traced the line with my finger. You're still there, I said. The kettle clicked off. I poured, didn't drink. Instead, I grabbed my keys and the deed folder and drove into town. The county office sat behind a row of crepe myrtles, pink petals already littering the sidewalk. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of toner. I took a number. A bell chimed. Click. When my turn came, I slid the deed across the counter. I need to see any recorded easements tied to Fourth Creek that touch this access. The clerk glanced at the parcel number. You're not in the HOA, she said. I know, I replied. That's the point. She nodded and pointed me toward the microfiche room. Drawer 8. You'll want plats. The machine hummed as I loaded the film. Images flickered, years rolling past in grainy frames. I found my father's survey first. There it was, clear as day. Then I found the HOA plat filed decades later. The subdivision looked clean, green spaces neatly labeled. I leaned closer. The easement was gone. No overlay. No notation. No footnote. Just a wide strip called Reserve A, like it had always been theirs. My jaw tightened. You erased it, I said to no one. I printed both pages and set them side by side on the counter. The clerk raised her eyebrows. That's odd. Is there any recorded easement granting HOA authority over that access, I asked. She typed, then shook her head. Nothing recorded. I thanked her and stepped outside into the sun. The paper felt thin in my hands. Thin but enough. I called Marta Reyes from the parking lot. Still fighting ghosts, she asked, her voice calm. Not ghosts, I said. Paper. She listened while I explained. When I finished, she said, if there's no recorded easement, they have no jurisdiction. Covenants don't create rights over land they don't own. That's what I thought. Thought doesn't matter, she said. Records do. Back home, I tacked the 2 plats to the barn wall. Old truth. New lie. I stood there longer than I meant to. My phone buzzed. Another email. Another notice. This one said fines would begin in 5 days. I walked back to the gate and retaped the original notice beneath my own sign. Private access. Recorded. Trespass will be reported. A car slowed on the road. Karen's assistant stared, then drove on. They still acted like they had authority. But authority without jurisdiction was just noise, and noise doesn't change records. The truck showed up just before noon. I heard it before I saw it, the low diesel growl drifting across the pasture. When I stepped onto the porch, a flatbed was already turning onto my private access tires, crunching gravel like it had permission. 2 men in orange vests hopped down, tools clanking. One of them dragged a wooden form toward the edge of the road. Concrete dust puffed into the air. I didn't shout. I didn't wave. I went back inside and opened the cabinet above the fridge. The drone case came down with a soft thump. "Let's be clear," I muttered, snapping the battery in. "You don't get to build first and ask later." The drone lifted with a sharp whine, climbing fast. From above, the scene laid itself out clean and undeniable: my gate at the south end, the old fence line, the strip of land my father had marked decades ago. And now orange stakes biting into dirt that wasn't theirs. Karen arrived 10 minutes later, heels clicking on gravel, sunglasses on like armor. She looked up, squinting at the drone. "You can't record us," she called. "This is a community project." "Not on my land," I said. She smiled thinly. "It's Reserve A." "Show the easement," I said. She waved a hand toward the workers. "We have board approval." "That's not an easement." Her smile slipped. "You're interfering." "I'm documenting," I replied. The workers hesitated, looking between us. One asked, "Ma'am, are we clear to pour?" Karen didn't answer him. She kept her eyes on me. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Then make it legal," I said. She turned away. "Proceed." The mixer chute swung out. Gray slurry began to fill the form. I filmed every second. By the time the first pad set, I was already in my truck, headed for the courthouse. The petition was straightforward. I'd filled out forms like this before, back when procedure still mattered. I attached the deed, the old survey, the side-by-side plats. I asked for one thing: a temporary restraining order to stop construction on land the HOA had no recorded right to touch. Filed. The stamp landed with a dull thud. For the first time that week, I exhaled. Hope doesn't arrive loud. It shows up as paperwork done right. I drove home to find the workers packing up. Karen was gone. The concrete pad sat there like a challenge. My phone buzzed as I pulled into the drive. Beep. Subject line: immediate action required. I opened the PDF on my phone. 6 pages. Fines backdated. Obstruction. Non-compliance. Amount due $1,250. Escalating daily. I laughed once, sharp. "You're fining me for stopping you from trespassing." Another call came in. Karen again. "This didn't have to get ugly," she said. "You're costing the community money." "You started pouring without an easement," I said. "That's ugly." She lowered her voice. "The board will not be intimidated by paperwork." "Paper can threaten," I said. "Records decide." She hung up. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and organized the footage. Angles, timestamps, faces, I labeled the folder clearly and made a backup. Then another. Outside, a neighbor slowed, rolled down his window. "They building something, trying to," I said. "On your land," I nodded. He shook his head and drove on. By evening, another email arrived. Then another. Each one louder than the last. Each one still missing the same thing. No recorded easement. I walked back out to the gate as the sun dropped long shadows stretching across the gravel. The fresh concrete was already curing gray and wrong. I took one last photo and sent it to Marta. Her reply came quick. "Good. Let them escalate. It makes the absence louder." I leaned against the fence and watched the road. The HOA had money. They had letterhead. They had a habit of acting first. What they didn't have was jurisdiction. And tomorrow I'd make sure the court saw that too. I found the grant by accident, the way you find termites by noticing what shouldn't be there. It was a one-page summary Marta had asked me to pull from the county portal. I sat at my kitchen table laptop, opened the concrete pad visible through the window, like a bruise on the gravel. I typed in the permit number 1 of the workers had muttered. The page loaded and a line jumped out: Northern Buffer Park and Community Kiosk, funded by Greenfield Development Incentive Grant. A kiosk. Karen hadn't been pouring concrete for safety. She'd been building a monument. I clicked the attachment. Click. The grant conditions were simple. Project must be placed on community-owned land or land subject to a recorded public easement. The words sat there plain as daylight. Recorded. I printed it and drove into town. The diner off Route 23 smelled like bacon grease and tired coffee. A good place for quiet conversations because everyone heard everything and no one admitted it. David Klein slid into the booth across from me like he didn't want to be seen doing it. He was Fourth Creek's former treasurer, thin, careful eyes that kept checking the window. "You're Mark," he said. "That's me," I replied. He nodded at the folder in my hands. "You really went after the records." "I went after the truth," I said. David's mouth tightened. "Karen's been telling people you're trying to block emergency access. Then she should produce the recorded easement," I said. He let out a dry laugh. "That's the problem. There isn't one." I slid the grant summary across the table. "You seen this?" His eyes flicked over the page. "Greenfield Development," he murmured. "They've been cozy with the board. The grant requires community land or a recorded easement," I said. "So if they applied, they had to claim they had rights over my access." David's hands stayed on the table, knuckles pale. "You want to know what paper trails look like inside an HOA? I want to know what they're hiding," I said. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. He didn't slide it to me right away. He just held it like it weighed something. "I resigned last fall," he said. "They started approving expenditures without votes." "Discretionary," Karen called it. "Emergency authority. Same word she uses on you." "Authority," I repeated. "Without records." He met my eyes. "Exactly." He finally pushed the flash drive across the table. Meeting minutes. Budget emails. Invoices. "You didn't get this from me. I didn't touch it yet. Does any of it create an easement?" David shook his head. "No. It creates paperwork that sounds official, but it doesn't record anything with the county." I took the drive and slipped it into my pocket. "Paper trails don't create rights," I said. David's gaze dropped to the grant page again. "They're building that kiosk because it's leverage. If the pad sits there long enough, people assume it's theirs. Assumptions turn into everybody knows. And everybody knows turns into fines," I said. His voice lowered. Mark, they're going to sue you. Let them, I said, though. My stomach tightened. After we separated, I drove to the post office and filed a FOIA request at the counter, the clerk stamping it with a bored thunk. I requested everything tied to the kiosk, grant maps applications, emails, contractor communications. That'll take a few days, she said. I'll wait, I replied. That night, I sat in my barn with the old map unrolled on a workbench, the overhead light buzzing. My father's notes were blunt. Just accuracy. At 9, my phone rang. A gravelly voice said, "You the guy fighting Karen?" "Depends who's asking," I said. "Donald Washington," he replied. "Retired engineer. Lived in Fourth Creek since Phase 1. I saw your flyer." "You believe it?" I asked. "I believe blueprints," he said. "And I still have the originals." Headlights swept across the barn door. Donald climbed out of an old Ford Ranger with a cardboard tube under his arm. He moved slow, but his eyes were sharp. He didn't waste time. "They're calling that strip Reserve A now," he asked. "On their plat," I said. "But the county has no recorded easement." Donald snorted. "Because the plat isn't the record." He unrolled the plans on my bench. Pages crackled. Lines and labels filled the sheet. And there, in bold notation along my north axis, were the words, "Existing private easement, do not obstruct." I stared at it until my eyes burned. Donald tapped the note. "Developer knew," he said. "We all knew. That's why they left it alone." Karen came later and started rewriting reality. I pointed at the plan. "This isn't in their HOA packet." "Of course it isn't," he said. "It doesn't help the story they're selling." We took photos. I scanned the page. I labeled the file plainly and made a second copy. Just before midnight, my email chimed. Beep. A message from the county clerk. FOIA request received. Then another email hit my inbox. The subject line was heavier than the words inside it. Notice of legal action. I opened it and read until my jaw clenched. Fourth Creek HOA had filed suit against me for interference with community access and unauthorized obstruction. They wanted an emergency order. They wanted fines. They wanted me painted as the problem. I sat back and looked at the blueprint on my bench. The one page that mattered. The one note that said what my father's deed already said. A map isn't a right if it's not recorded. Karen had paper. She had newsletters. She had threats. I had the record, and now I had proof they'd been lying around it. If they wanted a public fight, fine. I was done losing ground in private. I started before sunrise when the air still held the night's cool, and the gravel looked almost silver. The concrete pad Karen had poured sat farther up the access like a dare, but I didn't touch it. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of calling me destructive. I was going to do the one thing she couldn't stand, mark the line legally. On my kitchen table, 3 items lay in a neat stack: my deed, the certified survey, and a county-approved private land modification permit. Marta had made me get the permit even though it was my property. Why, I'd asked her on the phone, am I asking permission to protect what I already own? Because she'd said voice flat, you're building a paper shield. If there's no easement, they have no authority. Don't give them an opening to pretend otherwise. If there's no easement, they have no authority. I repeated it like a prayer as I rolled the rented auger off the trailer. The machine snarled to life and the first hole opened clean in the soil right inside the surveyed boundary. 6 positions evenly spaced, wide enough for a truck to pass if someone called me first. Emma stood on the porch in a hoodie, arms crossed against the chill. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure about the record," I said. and I'm sure about the line. By the time the sun tipped over the pasture, the bollards were in. Steel posts capped painted safety gray. I set them into concrete footings and checked each one with a level. When I was done, they stood there like punctuation. Not a wall. A sentence. At 9 sharp, Karen arrived. Her SUV stopped short, nose pointed at the posts like it had finally learned fear. She stepped out wearing a crimson blazer, as if the color itself could grant jurisdiction. A man climbed out behind her, hair slicked back, briefcase in hand. Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mark," she said too loud. "What is this?" "They're bollards," I said. "On my property." Her lawyer snapped open his case. "Mr. Rohr, you've illegally obstructed a community access route. Show the recorded easement," I said. Karen's jaw twitched. "It's on our plat." "Plats don't create rights," I replied. "Records do." The lawyer stepped closer, careful not to cross the line my stakes marked. "Emergency vehicles can still get through if they call," I said. "Like adults." Karen pointed at the gate behind me, repaired with a new lock. "You're escalating." I held up the permit packet. "I filed first." Her lawyer blinked. "You filed what county permit for private land traffic deterrence?" I said. "Stamped and approved." Karen's voice sharpened. "This is intimidation." "No," I said, keeping mine even. "This is jurisdiction." She pulled out her phone and started recording me. "Everyone needs to see what you're doing," she said. "Great," I answered. "Make sure you get the part where you can't produce an easement." 2 residents slowed on the road and watched from their cars, faces tight with curiosity. Karen turned toward them, switching to her performance voice. "He's blocking shared access," she announced. "We have seniors who—" "You have paper," I cut in. "Not records." Her lawyer tried again. "We will seek an injunction." "I already sought one," I said. "To stop you from building on land you don't have recorded rights to touch." Karen's cheeks flushed. "This isn't over." "I agree," I said. "That's why I called county compliance. I'd like an official review." A white county truck pulled in, tires crunching. A code inspector stepped out, clipboard tucked under his arm. He looked like a man who'd seen every version of neighbor drama and hated them all equally. "Morning," he said. "Which one of you is Mark Rohr?" "I am," I said, and handed him my permit packet without being asked. He flipped through it, eyebrows rising. "Well," he murmured, "this might be the first time someone filed everything before we showed up." Karen stepped forward. "Inspector, this is a community access route. He's obstructing it." The inspector didn't look at her yet. He looked at the survey first, then at the stakes, then at the steel posts. "These are on your parcel," he said to me. "Yes," I replied. "Surveyed and certified." Karen exhaled hard. "But the HOA has authority. It's Reserve A." The inspector finally faced her. "Ma'am, do you have a recorded easement granting the association rights over this access?" Karen lifted her chin. "It's on our plat." "I'm not asking about your plat," he said. "I'm asking about the county record." Her lawyer cleared his throat. "We can provide documentation." "Today," the inspector said. "Do you have a recorded easement today?" Karen's silence was loud. The inspector made a note, then looked back at me. "Your posts appear compliant with your permit," he said. "I'm not issuing a citation." Karen's mouth opened. "You can't, I can," he said, and tapped his clipboard once like a gavel. "Also, ma'am, if your association is building on land without a recorded easement, that's a separate matter." One of the residents called out. "Wait, there's no easement," Karen snapped. "That's not what this is." The inspector stepped back toward his truck. No record means no right, he said almost to himself, then climbed in and drove away. Karen stayed frozen for a heartbeat. Then she lowered her phone. You're going to regret humiliating this community, she hissed. I didn't raise my voice. I asked for the record. She stalked back to her SUV, lawyer following. As she climbed in, she leaned out the window and said, "We'll let the neighborhood decide what kind of man you are." After they left, one of the residents lingered. He looked from the steel posts to the broken concrete pad. "So, they really don't have anything recorded?" he asked. I held up my deed folder. If they did, I said they'd show it. He nodded once, then walked away, phone already in his hand. By noon, my inbox filled with new subject lines: community under siege, safety concerns, unneighborly obstruction. Karen was taking it public. I sat on the porch watching the steel posts catch the sunlight and felt something settle in my chest, not anger, but resolve. Finally, someone fought back. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and old paper, the kind of place where voices automatically dropped an octave. Marta met me at the steps with a folder tucked under her arm. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready since the third time she hit my gate," I said. Inside, the hallway hummed with fluorescent light. A bailiff pointed us toward room 2B. Karen was already there, seated 2 rows ahead, blazer crimson, as ever hair-smooth attorney beside her, flipping through a binder like he was shuffling a deck. When the clerk called the case, the room stood. The judge entered without looking at anyone, took his seat, and adjusted his glasses. "Be seated," he said. Karen's attorney rose first. "Your Honor, the Homeowners Association seeks immediate relief. Mr. Rohr has erected unauthorized barriers on a shared community access route, creating a hazard and disrupting shared." The judge repeated flat. "According to whom?" "According to the recorded plat and the association's governing documents," the attorney said, warming to his rhythm. "Reserve A is designated for community use." Marta stood slowly. "Your Honor, may I?" The judge nodded once. "Go ahead, Ms. Reyes." Marta's voice was calm, almost bored. "This entire request turns on one issue: whether the HOA has legal authority over my client's access. Authority requires a recorded right, an easement, a dedication, something in the county record." Karen's attorney scoffed. "We have documentation." "Then produce the recorded easement," Marta said, and held out her hand like she was offering him a door. He hesitated. "The plat." "The plat is not an easement," Marta replied, "and it doesn't erase one." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Rohr," he said, looking at me for the first time, "you own the strip in question." "Yes, sir," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Deeded since 1978. Recorded access." "And you are not a member of the HOA?" he asked. "I never joined," I said. "My parcel predates it. They started sending notices anyway." Karen's lips pressed tight. She didn't look at me. She stared at the judge like she could will him to agree. Marta slid a packet to the clerk. "Exhibits A through F," she said. "Deed original survey, certified boundary survey, county record search results, and side-by-side plats." The judge flipped through the top page, eyes moving quickly. "County record search," he said. "This indicates no recorded easement in favor of Fourth Creek HOA for this access corridor." "That's correct," Marta said. Karen's attorney stood again, face flushing. "Your Honor, the association has maintained that path for years. Residents rely on it." "There is an implied no," the judge cut in sharp enough to stop the air. "Implied is not recorded. Maintenance does not create jurisdiction." A low murmur rolled through the benches behind us. A woman in the back whispered, "So they don't have anything." Karen twisted in her seat, glaring, but the judge didn't even glance her way. Marta continued. "We also have evidence of the HOA attempting to construct improvements on the strip concrete work after being notified that my client disputes jurisdiction." Objection. Karen's attorney snapped. "That's a separate issue. It's the same issue," Marta said. "They acted as though they had authority without a recorded right." The judge set the packet down and looked directly at Karen's attorney. "Do you have a recorded easement granting your client authority over this access?" The attorney opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "We believe the plat. I asked about the record," the judge said. "Do you have it?" Karen's attorney's eyes flicked to Karen. She gave a tiny shake of her head, almost imperceptible, as if the absence could be hidden by refusing to speak it. The judge's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Then the association's claim of authority is unsupported." Marta's hand brushed my sleeve, a quiet signal. Let him say it. The judge glanced at the file, then spoke into the silence, each word clean as a stamp. "The HOA has no recorded easement granting authority over this access." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. It felt like the room had exhaled at once. Karen's face went pale under her makeup. Her attorney shifted his feet like the floor had changed. The judge went on, "Accordingly, the motion for emergency injunctive relief is denied. Mr. Rohr may maintain lawful deterrence on his property, consistent with county permits. The association is ordered to cease any enforcement actions against Mr. Rohr relating to this access until further order of the court." Karen's attorney rose in a panic. "Your Honor, we request time for discovery." "You may have discovery," the judge said, "but not enforcement without jurisdiction. If you believe you have a record, you can present it. Until then, you do not get to act like you own what you cannot prove." The murmurs grew louder. Someone behind Karen said, "We've been paying fines for that." Karen snapped her head around, furious, but the judge's gavel tapped once. "Order." Marta nodded politely. "Thank you, Your Honor." Outside, the sun hit like a spotlight. I stood under the courthouse portico while Marta zipped her folder. "You heard him," she said. I swallowed. My throat felt tight, not from fear now, but from release. "No easement," I said. Marta's mouth twitched. "No authority." Across the street, a reporter I didn't recognize lifted a camera. Residents clustered on the steps, whispering, phones out, eyes wide. Karen pushed past them, shoulders stiff, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. As she reached the curb, someone called, "Karen, where's the easement?" She didn't answer. Her heel caught on the edge of the sidewalk, and for a split second, she looked like she might stumble. She recovered, but the moment stuck, power pressed by a single missing document. I watched her get into her SUV and slam the door. It wasn't the sound that mattered. It was what the sound admitted. Back on the steps, an older man in a ball cap approached me. "So you're telling me," he said quietly, "they've been acting like that road is theirs, and there's nothing recorded?" I held up my folder. "Records decide," I said, "not rumors." He nodded slow. About time somebody fought back. I didn't smile, but something in my chest unclenched. The court had asked one question, and Karen had no answer. Everything else would fall from that. The evening sun was just starting to dip behind the horizon as I walked into the HOA hall. It felt like the calm after a storm, but I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Inside, the air smelled like dust and cleaning supplies. Empty chairs lined the hall, all facing a podium where the Fourth Creek HOA board had once made its claims. Now only a few lingering residents sat in the back, the ones who had seen enough to know they were witnessing history. The tension had shifted from angry whispers to silence. I had received the email just this morning. Fourth Creek HOA officially dissolved. Board members resigned effective immediately. I hadn't expected it to come so quickly. In the weeks since the hearing, everything had unraveled. The public backlash had grown louder. Neighbors who had once stayed silent, afraid of losing their place, were now openly questioning everything. A few had quietly shared their concerns with me, others had started gathering their own evidence. It all pointed to one thing: Karen's empire had crumbled, and it was time to pick up the pieces. Standing in the center of the hall, I saw the remnants of her control files strewn about, old notices left behind in haste. I walked to the counter and picked up the framed blueprint of the community kiosk that had once been a symbol of her power. I didn't need to take it. I had already won. But the image of that useless structure still felt like a lingering reminder of how far she'd gone. The door opened behind me and a few more residents filtered in, nodding at me with quiet respect. A few even glanced at the empty chairs where the HOA board once sat. The soft echo of footsteps rang out, and Karen entered, her heels clicking against the tile floor. She was alone, no lawyer by her side, no board members in tow. Her crimson blazer was gone, replaced by a muted gray dress that did nothing to hide the defeat in her posture. Her face was still tight with pride, but it lacked the usual confidence. She didn't look at me as she moved to the front, her gaze fixed on the floor, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I wondered if she still believed she could turn this around. I wondered if she thought she could convince them all that the law didn't matter. A resident walked up beside me and cleared his throat. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "The HOA's gone." I nodded. "It's official. They're done." Karen finally raised her head, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment she said nothing, just looked at me with that same silent challenge in her eyes, as if she were searching for something I couldn't give her. Her jaw worked, but no words came out. A group of residents filed in, some glancing at Karen with suspicion, others with disdain. A man in his 60s spoke up, his voice clear. "So what now? What happens to all the fines?" I gestured toward the front of the room where the podium once belonged to Karen. "Now," I said, "we clear the air." One of the older women who had supported Karen before crossed the room and handed me an envelope. "This is the new deed, Mark," she said. "The easement's been re-recorded. It's official now." I opened the envelope and unfolded the document. Sure enough, there, it was the bold seal of the county clerk, confirming the easement was now legally recognized once more. The land, my land, had been acknowledged once again. "Recorded easement confirmed," I read aloud. The words felt weighty, final. It was over. Karen stood motionless, but her face had changed. It wasn't the rage I had expected. It wasn't even the cold anger I'd seen in her before. It was something else, a quiet realization that the power she had been clinging to was gone. The community had made its decision. The last of the board members had slipped out quietly, one by one. A few residents had filed out with them, but the silence remained. I turned back toward the entrance where a truck had just pulled up. The steel bollards I'd installed stood proudly, their gray paint gleaming in the evening sun. There was no fanfare, no grand reveal, just steel and concrete standing guard. The same posts that had once seemed so small, so futile. Face of Karen's authority now felt like a monument. I watched as the residents started gathering around the bollards, murmuring among themselves. Karen's SUV was still parked in the lot, but she didn't move to leave. Mark, a voice called from the back. It was Marta, carrying a few papers in her hand. "I just wanted to give you this," she said. "I spoke with the county about those fines." I took the papers from her, but I already knew what they said. The fines that had once been levied against me were being dismissed. The county was wiping them away, along with the stain of the HOA's false claims. I didn't do it for the fines, I said, though I was thankful they were gone. I did it for the land. Marta smiled faintly, her eyes gleaming with pride. You did it for more than just that mark. You did it for everyone. The residents started to gather in front of me, each of them looking at me with something new, respect maybe, or at least acknowledgement that this wasn't just my fight anymore. Karen stood at the far end of the room, her hands now trembling slightly as she looked at the documents on the podium. She didn't speak again. By the time the last of the neighbors had left, I was standing alone in the hall, staring at the framed kiosk blueprint. It wasn't the kiosk that mattered anymore. It was the truth. The truth had always been there, written in the county's records, and now it was finally recognized. The door clicked shut behind me. It wasn't the end of anything, really. It was the beginning. And it felt like justice. The sun slipped low as I walked the length of the access road one last time that day. Gravel still held the heat from afternoon, and the steel bollards caught the light like quiet sentries standing watch. Beyond them, the pasture rolled out unchanged grass, bending with the wind the same way it had when my father Fosfurst showed me the line. The land didn't care about letters, meetings, or raised voices. It recognized only what was written and what endured. I stopped at the center post and rested my palm against the cool metal. The plaque had been mounted that morning, clean bolts, no decoration. Just words pressed deep enough to outlast arguments. Recorded easement confirmed. No logo, no HOA seal, no slogans about community. Just the record finally acknowledged. For the first time in months, no car slowed at the bend. No phone lifted to record. No one leaned out a window to argue. The access lay quiet, open, ordinary, peaceful in a way that only comes after noise has burned itself out. When I reached the porch, Emma was already there, sitting on the top step, with 2 mugs warming her hands. She looked up and smiled, the kind that didn't ask anything from me. Coffee, she said. Always, I answered. I sat beside her wood, creaking softly beneath us. The sky was turning copper, and violet clouds stretched thin like brushed paint. We watched in silence while the day folded itself away. They were talking about it at school, she said eventually. About the road, I asked. About you, she said. About the HOA. About how it ended. I exhaled slowly, and she shrugged. Most of them didn't even know what an easement was. They just knew someone kept saying they had authority, and then suddenly they didn't. That's usually how it goes, I said. She tipped her mug's steam, curling into the air. Is it really done? I looked out at the gravel, the posts, the long stretch of land that had carried trucks, cattle, and now far too much history. It's done where it counts, I said. The record's clear. She nodded, thinking. Grandpa would have liked that. The words landed heavier than I expected. My father had been a quiet man. He never liked confrontation, never raised his voice. He trusted lines on paper more than promises spoken aloud. He used to tell me something I said. Emma turned toward me. What? Whenever someone tried to take more than they were offered, he'd say, "Show me the paper." She smiled. That sounds like him. He didn't mean paper was powerful, I said. He meant paper remembers. People forget. Paper doesn't. The porch light clicked on as dusk settled, insects drifting toward it in lazy loops. Down the road, a pickup passed without slowing, tires humming steady. No hesitation, no challenge. Do you think Karen understands now? Emma asked. I thought about the way she'd stood silent when the board dissolved, how quickly certainty drained when the record didn't back it up. I think she understands the difference between claiming authority and having it, I said. And the neighbors, Emma asked. They understand too, I said. Some are relieved, some are embarrassed, most are just tired. She leaned her shoulder against mine. I'm proud of you. I swallowed. I didn't do anything special. You didn't back down, she said. That counts. We watched the last rim of sun slip below the horizon. The sky deepened, stars beginning to prick through the dark. The access stayed empty. After a moment I spoke, not loud, not for anyone else. They claimed authority, I said. Emma waited patient. They never had a recorded easement. She nodded slowly, like the truth settled somewhere deeper than words. That's all it took. That was everything I said. The air cooled. Somewhere far off, a gate closed with a solid metallic sound, final and calm. I thought about the months of threats, notices, and meetings that tried to turn assumption into law. None of it survived the record. Authority had ended where it always does, at the line that doesn't move just because someone pushes it. I finished my coffee and stood switching off the porch light. Darkness spread, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. Before going inside, I looked back once more at the access road, the posts, the plaque catching a sliver of moonlight. Authority means nothing without a recorded easement. For the first time in a long while, I slept, knowing the ground agreed. I woke later that night and listened to the quiet, the kind that doesn't ring in your ears. No engines, no radios, no voices rehearsing authority they couldn't prove. Just wind against the siding and the house settling into itself, content with the truth finally in place. In the morning, the road would still be there, open and ordinary, and so would the record, patient and unmoved, waiting for anyone who bothered to read. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about leaving something solid behind, something my daughter could point to and say was real. Lines that held, records that didn't bend, authority that stopped where it was supposed to stop. The lesson was simple, and it would last longer than any board or notice ever could, written quietly into the land and carried forward without needing to be defended again. That knowledge stayed with me as sleep finally came, steady and untroubled, the way rest feels when a boundary has been honored and the argument is finished. No one could drive through it anymore, not with claims, not with noise, not with pretend authority. That record stood. It always stood. The posted order went up beside my gate at dusk, the county seal catching light as the steel bollards stood restored and still. Neighbors gathered quietly, reading the notice out loud, the moment landing, not with cheers, but with relief that felt earned and shared. Justice isn't loud, it's steady, written into the record where power finally stops pretending. The lesson was simple, and public authority ends where transparency begins, and communities heal when lines are honored instead of erased. Finally, someone fought back, and not with force, but with proof that closed the wound and let the ground breathe again.